Welcome to Nikki's Nightmares, where chilling tales come to life. In today's terrifying story, we explore the unsettling world of urban legends, disturbing tales passed from person to person that blur the line between myth and reality. From the eerie corpse bride of Chihuahua, to the shadowy figure known as Slender Man, to the bizarre true story of a dead outlaw who became a carnival attraction, these legends hide fragments of truth buried beneath decades of whispers, fear, and mystery. The deeper we look into these stories, the harder it becomes to tell where folklore ends and something far more disturbing begins. If you love scary stories, paranormal encounters, urban legends, and true horror experiences, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and join me as we delve into the deep, dark, and the mysterious. Most people have heard at least one story that someone swears is true. Not something from a book, not a scene from a movie, but a story passed quietly from person to person. Usually it begins the same way. A friend of a friend told me this happened, and somehow that small detail makes the story feel more believable. These stories have a name. They're called urban legends. Urban legends are a strange kind of modern folklore. They are stories that feel grounded in reality. Stories about ordinary people in ordinary places. Yet something about them is always just slightly wrong, slightly unsettling. A babysitter alone in a quiet house receives a series of disturbing phone calls, only to discover the calls are coming from inside the home. A driver notices a shadowy figure sitting silently in the back seat of their car. A bag of Halloween candy hides something far more dangerous than sugar. The details change depending on who tells the story. The locations shift, the names disappear, but the core of the story remains the same. And that is how urban legends survive. For centuries, people passed stories down through folklore. Tales of ghosts, monsters, curses, and strange encounters in the woods. But urban legends are different. These stories live in the modern world. They take place in shopping malls, highways, apartment buildings, movie theaters, and suburban neighborhoods. Instead of kings and ancient spirits, the characters are babysitters, travelers, students, and neighbors, people just like us. That's part of what makes these stories so powerful. They feel possible. Folklorists, researchers who study the evolution of stories, have long believed that urban legends act like a mirror reflecting the fears of the society that creates them. In earlier centuries, people feared witches and demons lurking in the forest. Today, our fears look different. Technology, crime, contamination, isolation. And those anxieties quietly find their way into the stories we tell each other. Many urban legends revolve around everyday objects, cars, telephones, elevators, or even food. A simple bag of candy becomes a warning about hidden dangers. A late-night phone call becomes a symbol of vulnerability. A strange arcade game becomes something far more sinister than entertainment. One particularly eerie example involves a mysterious arcade machine said to have appeared briefly in the early 1980s. According to the legend, the game was called Polybius. Players claimed it caused strange side effects, nightmares, nausea, even hallucinations. Some said men in black suits were seen collecting data from the machines before they vanished without explanation. Whether the story was based on a misunderstood arcade game or something more mysterious, no one has ever been able to prove the legend completely true. But the story continues to circulate. And that's the strange thing about urban legends. Even when people know a story might not be real, they still repeat it, because these stories don't just entertain us, they warn us. Psychologists believe humans are naturally drawn to stories that contain what they call minimally counterintuitive elements, something that feels mostly normal, but contains one disturbing twist. A quiet neighborhood where something watches from the upstairs window. A late-night drive where the passenger in the back seat shouldn't exist. A simple game that leaves players feeling like they've seen something they were never meant to see. That tiny disruption makes the story unforgettable. Over time, the details evolve. Stories that once spread slowly through whispers and conversation now travel instantly across the internet. Social media, films, online forums, and viral videos allow these legends to reach millions of people overnight. But the core mechanism remains the same. Someone hears the story, someone believes it might be true, and then they pass it on. Interestingly, some urban legends actually do contain small pieces of truth buried beneath layers of exaggeration. In the 1970s, police in Virginia received reports of a man dressed in a bunny suit who was seen threatening people with a hatchet. The strange incident would later evolve into the infamous Bunny Man legend. In another bizarre case, a wax museum funhouse in California displayed what was believed to be a prop mummy for decades, until someone discovered it was the preserved corpse of a real outlaw named Elmer McCurdy. Even the famous story about alligators living in city sewer systems may have a small basis in reality. While thriving sewer populations are unlikely, baby alligators have occasionally been found in urban drainage systems, sometimes after being released by former pet owners. Reality twisted slightly, just enough to become legend. And that may be the most unsettling part of all, because urban legends sit in a strange space between fact and fiction. They are stories that feel like they could have happened, stories that sound believable enough to repeat, stories that linger in the back of your mind the next time you're home alone or driving down an empty road late at night. And the longer these stories survive, the harder it becomes to separate myth from reality, because sometimes the most disturbing legends are the ones that begin with just a small piece of truth. The Corpse Bride of Chihuahua. There is a small bridal shop in the city of Chihuahua, Mexico, where for nearly a century a silent figure stood behind glass, watching the street. Her name is La Pascualita. At first glance, she appears to be nothing more than a mannequin dressed in an elegant wedding gown. But according to one of Mexico's most chilling urban legends, the figure in that storefront may not be a mannequin at all. Some believe she is something far more disturbing: a corpse. The legend begins in 1930, inside a bridal boutique called La Popular, owned by a woman named Pascuala Esparza. On March 25th of that year, a new mannequin appeared in the shop window, modeling a bridal gown from the store's spring and summer collection. Normally, a new display would have gone unnoticed in a small clothing shop, but almost immediately, people began to stare, because the mannequin didn't look like a mannequin. Locals passing the store noticed something unsettling about her appearance. Her face seemed unusually expressive. Thick eyelashes framed glassy eyes that seemed to hold a distant awareness. Her skin had a realistic tone and texture that looked disturbingly human. But the most unsettling detail was her hands. They were constructed with such precise realism that people claimed they could see fine wrinkles, fingernails, and even faint veins beneath the surface. It was unlike any mannequin anyone had ever seen before. And then, the rumors began. According to local legend, Pascuala Esparza had a daughter who was preparing to be married. On the morning of her wedding day, tragedy struck. The young bride was reportedly bitten by a black widow spider, and the venom took her life before she ever reached the altar. Some versions of the story say it was a scorpion instead. Others claim she took her own life because her mother disapproved of the marriage. But every version of the legend ends the same way. The grieving mother, unable to accept her daughter's death, had the body embalmed and preserved. And soon after, a new mannequin appeared in the shop window, one that looked exactly like the bride who had died. From that moment forward, the figure became known as La Pascualita, the corpse bride. Over the decades, the legend only grew darker. Customers entering the shop claimed the mannequin's eyes seemed to follow them as they walked through the store. Some said they looked away for a moment, only to turn back and find her standing in a slightly different position. Even employees admitted the mannequin made them uneasy. One worker reportedly said, "Every time I go near Pascualita, my hands break out in a sweat. Her hands are very realistic, and she even has varicose veins on her legs. I believe she's a real person." The rumors didn't stop there. Another strange story began circulating through the city, one involving a French magician who supposedly became obsessed with the mannequin. According to the tale, he visited the store late at night, using mysterious powers to bring her to life. Locals claimed the two could be seen wandering the streets together in the darkness. Dancing through the quiet city before dawn returned her to the storefront window. By morning, she would be standing there again, perfectly still, watching. Of course, many people have tried to uncover the truth behind La Pascualita, but the mystery has proven difficult to solve. Some historians question whether Pascuala Esparza's daughter even existed. Others point out that it would be nearly impossible for an embalmed human body to remain intact for decades in the harsh desert heat of northern Mexico. Mortuary professionals have weighed in as well. Tomás Prower, a licensed mortuary expert and author, explained that a corpse exposed to sunlight, temperature changes, and human interaction for nearly a century would deteriorate rapidly without constant restoration. Even the preserved body of Vladimir Lenin, which is maintained by specialists and regularly re-embalmed, requires extensive care just to remain presentable. If La Pascualita truly were a human body, it would have required decades of constant preservation. Yet despite the speculation, no one connected to the bridal shop ever confirmed the rumors. They simply allowed the legend to grow. And perhaps the most telling response came from the shop's owner when someone finally asked the question directly. "Is it true?" they asked. The owner simply smiled and replied, "I really couldn't say." For more than 90 years, tourists traveled from around the world to see the mysterious mannequin standing behind the glass. Some came out of curiosity, others came hoping to glimpse something darker, something that might confirm the legend. But the mystery took an unexpected turn in 2024. After nearly a century in the window, La Pascualita was finally removed from display. In her place now stands an informational board explaining the history and the legend of the eerie mannequin. But even with her disappearance, the story refuses to die. Because somewhere in Chihuahua, people still remember the lifelike bride who stood silently in a storefront window for almost 100 years. A bride who looked far too human, and whose glassy eyes always seemed to be watching. The question, of course, still lingers. Was La Pascualita simply a remarkably crafted mannequin? Or for nearly a century, was a corpse bride standing quietly behind that glass? The chilling rise of Slender Man. There are certain figures that seem to exist on the edge of imagination, stories whispered across generations in the dark, creatures that begin as simple tales, yet somehow grow into something far larger than the people who first spoke their names. One of the most unsettling modern legends to emerge from the internet age is a figure known simply as Slender Man. According to the website Know Your Meme, Slender Man is described as a mythical creature, often depicted as a tall, unnaturally thin figure dressed in a black suit with a completely blank face. No eyes, no mouth, no expression of any kind, just a smooth, pale void where a human face should be. In many versions of the mythology, this silent figure possesses disturbing abilities. His arms can stretch to impossible lengths, bending and extending far beyond what any human body should allow. From his back, long, tentacle-like appendages sometimes emerge, twisting and coiling in the shadows behind him, and almost always, he is seen standing silently among the trees. The character has taken many different forms across the internet. On craft websites, fans have created Slender Man keychains, bracelets, and even plush toys. On social media platforms like Flickr and Instagram, people share elaborate costumes and artistic recreations of the figure, sometimes building entire scenes using photography or Lego figures. YouTube hosts hundreds of thousands of videos exploring the legend, stories, short films, and eerie encounters that blur the line between fiction and reality. Yet through every interpretation, certain details remain constant: the black suit, the unnatural thinness, and the blank, featureless face. The legend of Slender Man first appeared in June of 2009 on a comedy internet forum known as Something Awful. The site had launched a contest asking users to create a modern myth, a story designed to frighten people in the digital age. One contributor, a user named Eric Knudsen, posting under the pseudonym Victor Surge, submitted 2 altered photographs. The images appeared to be taken sometime in the mid-1980s. In them, groups of children stand together, smiling for the camera. But in the background, partially hidden in shadow, a tall and disturbing figure watches from a distance. Its limbs were far too long, its body unnaturally thin, and its face completely blank. Alongside the photographs, Knudsen added a small fragment of text suggesting that 14 children and the photographer who took the images had mysteriously vanished. The post was intentionally vague, a fragment of a story rather than a complete one. But that fragment ignited something unexpected. What began as a simple internet meme, an idea designed to spread and evolve, quickly spiraled into a collaborative mythology. Within weeks, thousands of people were creating their own drawings, stories, and theories about the strange figure lurking in the woods. Slender Man began appearing in online horror fiction known as creepypasta, where stories are shared and passed around like modern campfire tales. Soon he appeared in video games, artwork, and one of the most influential YouTube series built around the legend, Marble Hornets, gathered hundreds of thousands of followers. Folklorists began to study the phenomenon. Jeff Tolbert, a researcher from Indiana University who has written about the character, described its creation as something unusual, an open-source form of storytelling. No single person controlled the myth anymore. Instead, thousands of people across the internet collectively shaped it, adding elements, rejecting others, slowly building a shared vision of what Slender Man was supposed to be. The character itself seemed to echo older folklore, like the big bad wolf, the headless horseman, or the nameless figures that haunt forests in ancient legends. Slender Man was almost always depicted standing silently in the woods. His tentacle-like limbs hinted at the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft, creatures from dimensions beyond our understanding. And the black suit, so eerily formal, reminded some people of villains from The Matrix, the skeletal figure Jack Skellington, or even assassins from the Hitman video game series. Whether intentional or coincidence, the result was something strangely familiar. A modern monster built from fragments of older fears. For several years, Slender Man remained what it had always been intended to be, a fictional myth passed around online. But in 2014, the story took a horrifying turn. On May 31st of that year, in Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, lured their 11-year-old classmate into a wooded area behind Geyser's home. Investigators later revealed that the two girls had been reading Slender Man stories online, particularly on the creepypasta website. According to authorities, the girls believed they could become servants or proxies of the fictional creature, and they believed that if they carried out a sacrifice, Slender Man would protect their families and allow them to live with him in a place they called Slender Mansion. In the woods that day, the girls attacked their friend, stabbing her 19 times. 2 of the wounds struck major organs. Another missed a major artery by less than a millimeter. Miraculously, the victim survived. After being left for dead, the injured girl managed to crawl to a nearby bike path, where she was discovered by a passing bicyclist and rushed to the hospital. She spent 6 days recovering from her injuries. Following a massive search, police eventually captured the 2 suspects near Interstate 94. A knife believed to have been used in the attack was found in one of the girls' bags. The case stunned the country. What had once been an internet horror story had suddenly become linked to a real act of violence. In 2017, an HBO documentary titled Beware the Slender Man explored the disturbing case in detail. Court proceedings revealed that the girls had planned the attack for months. One of them, Morgan Geyser, was later diagnosed with childhood-onset schizophrenia. Both girls ultimately pleaded not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Weier was eventually committed to a mental hospital for 25 years, though she was granted conditional release in 2021 under strict supervision. Geyser was committed to a psychiatric hospital for 40 years, yet the story did not end there. In November of 2025, Morgan Geyser escaped from a Wisconsin group home by cutting off her ankle monitor. For nearly 24 hours, authorities searched for her. She was eventually captured at a truck stop in Posen, Illinois, near Chicago. And even today, the name Slender Man continues to linger across the internet, a creature born from a joke on an online forum, a faceless figure standing quietly among the trees, a myth that spread faster than anyone could have predicted, and a chilling reminder that sometimes the stories we create have consequences far beyond the shadows where they begin. The outlaw who became a carnival corpse. Some people become famous after they die. Their stories are remembered, their names written into history, their legacies studied and debated. But Elmer McCurdy's legacy was something far stranger. After his death, he didn't become a legend. He became a prop, not metaphorically, literally. For decades, his body hung inside carnivals, amusement parks, movie sets, and fun houses, passed off as nothing more than a lifeless mannequin. Visitors laughed, walked past him, and pointed at the creepy decorations swaying in the darkness. No one suspected that what they were looking at was not a prop at all, but the real, preserved corpse of a man who had been dead for over 60 years. And the most disturbing part of the story is this. For most of that time, nobody realized it. The truth finally surfaced in 1976. That year, a crew from the television show The $6 Million Man arrived at the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, California. The production team planned to film a scene inside a dark ride called Laugh in the Dark, a twisting, rattling attraction where visitors traveled through a tunnel filled with demons, skeletons, and grotesque figures that lunged from the shadows as the ride cars jolted along the track. It was exactly the kind of place where a dusty mannequin hanging from a noose wouldn't raise suspicion. While preparing the set, one of the crew members noticed a particularly realistic figure dangling from the ceiling. Assuming it was part of the scenery, he reached out and grabbed the arm to move it out of the camera's frame. The moment he pulled on it, the arm broke off in his hand. At first, he thought the prop had simply deteriorated with age. But when he looked closer, what he saw beneath the cracked surface made his blood run cold. Underneath the dried, leathery skin was bone. This wasn't a mannequin. It was a human body. The corpse hanging in that funhouse belonged to a man named Elmer McCurdy, a small-time outlaw who had died 65 years earlier. McCurdy's life had been anything but legendary. He wasn't a brilliant criminal mastermind or a daring gunslinger. In fact, by most accounts, he was clumsy, unlucky, and notoriously bad at committing crimes. In 1911, he attempted to rob a train near Okesa, Oklahoma. The heist was a disaster. Instead of making off with a fortune, McCurdy managed to steal only $46 and 2 jugs of whiskey. After the robbery, he fled north and hid in a barnyard along the Kansas border. But it didn't take long for the law to catch up with him. A posse of police tracked him down, and a gunfight erupted among the haystacks. When the shooting stopped, Elmer McCurdy lay dead. His body was transported to a funeral home in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where it waited, day after day, for someone to claim it. No one ever did. Seeing an opportunity, the undertaker made a decision that would turn McCurdy's death into something bizarre and deeply unsettling. He embalmed the body and put it on display. Visitors were allowed to view the preserved outlaw, but only if they paid a small fee. To collect the money, the undertaker had an unusual method. Guests had to place a nickel directly into the corpse's mouth. For years, people came to see the dead outlaw. Then, one day, a man arrived claiming to be McCurdy's long-lost brother. He insisted the family wanted to finally lay Elmer to rest and requested custody of the body. The undertaker, believing the story, released the corpse. But the man was lying. He wasn't family at all. He was a carnival promoter. Within weeks, Elmer McCurdy's preserved body had become the newest attraction in a traveling carnival sideshow. And that was only the beginning. For the next 60 years, the mummified outlaw drifted through American entertainment like a ghost that no one recognized. His corpse appeared in carnivals, haunted houses, wax museums, and roadside attractions. Sometimes he was dressed up like a bandit. Other times he was hung from gallows or propped against walls as a gruesome decoration. As decades passed, the truth about the body faded into obscurity. Eventually, the story of Elmer McCurdy was forgotten entirely. People assumed the corpse was nothing more than a cleverly made dummy, and so it remained, hanging silently in the dark, until the day that television crew member grabbed its arm. After the shocking discovery at the Pike, investigators examined the body and confirmed its identity. The long-lost outlaw had finally been found. In 1977, 66 years after his death, Elmer McCurdy was finally given a proper burial. His remains were transported to Summit View Cemetery in Guthrie, Oklahoma, where he was laid to rest beneath a simple gravestone. The marker lists 2 dates: death 1911, burial 1977, a span of time that hides a very strange story. And just to make sure history never repeats itself, officials placed a thick layer of concrete over the casket before sealing the grave. A final precaution, so that the outlaw who spent decades wandering through carnivals and fun houses would never go on display again. Because sometimes the strangest horror stories aren't about ghosts or monsters. Sometimes they're about what happens to us after we're gone, and how long it can take for the dead to finally be laid to rest. The story ends here, but the terror does not. Join me again. Like, comment, and subscribe if you dare.